Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Peace Dealer. Here with another banger. I know you guys are really gonna like this one. Um, if you're familiar, for those of you who are present for episode 158 of Peace Talk, I had a very extraordinary guest who really helped us break down how to align your frequency with planetary alignment and overall just, tap into frequency and working with frequencies. And I'm glad to say that we are back again with more of this wisdom. I remember the last time we had this guest on, a lot of you were very excited and you did wish to have him back. And he is back. Trust me, I think the context of what we're going to speak on today are going to be both very unconventional and somewhat controversial, but really awesome. I kind of consider this like a missing key or link that uh, will really help me personally, put a lot together and align better with what I'm doing and taking. But in a nutshell, we're going to really spend the next few moments, breaking down pretty simply and easily how to raise your vibration and connect with actual frequencies to produce all sorts of effects. Something that I feel like is perfect to speak on in Gemini season. Shout out to Joel in the live chat and all of you all, or the rest of you who are joining. And I think you're gonna have a lot that you really are excited to learn about. Okay, so definitely keep an open mind. I think many of you are already familiar with the magic of working with frequencies, but without further ado, uh, Doc, thank you for joining us again.
Great to be here, Michael. Thank you so much.
Oh yes, and for those who might be watching you new, where are you based in? Where are you at?
Yeah, so I'm in Alberta, Canada. I live in a small prairie town just outside the capital city.
Awesome, that's what's up. Well, yeah, I mean, we're glad to have you back, and I mean, I'm really just super excited to, discuss how much has changed since we last spoke, and what you got for us today.
Thank you, sir. Um, one of the things that happens is there's a lot of information that floats around in the general public about raising your vibration, but quite often it's like a partial picture. I think probably one of the speakers I enjoy the most is Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Right.
He's at least taken some of the practical gist of the concept and then made it into a kind of like a package format that people can work with. Unfortunately, Dispenza also doesn't address some of the key issues. One of the key issues is inertia, and I'll give you a really simple example. So, in a nutshell, Dr. Joe Dispenza discovered through the scientific method that you can literally physically change your gene expression within 4 days by changing your mental and emotional state. So, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that which constitutes your physical body, your mental and emotional, behavior, uh, the states that you experience, how you remember things, how you plan your future, how you react to the moments. These all have an impact on your physical body, but in order to get to that change, to get to the place that you want to be, where you're actually changing your current state and you're modifying your future to a better one, you do have to actually achieve that mental and emotional state of where you're already experiencing this. And then, of course, there's all kinds of information floating around about like the secret, etc. But
Right, and the law of assumption and being in that state, which I feel like you just touched on.
well, I mean, that's a perfect example. I mean,
Right.
it's exactly what you're describing. And so, where the inertia comes in is that if you've got someone who say, they've suffered through trauma, or they've got, accumulated stress, and this is impacting their minds and body and emotions. The net result is they've got a heavy gravity, or a heavier gravity, than the energy that they have on hand to overcome it. So the only way that we get to experience meaningful, lasting state change is that we have to get to an energy threshold that's at least on par and excels that heavy gravity. And so one of the things that happens is, the pattern, the informational pattern of the state change itself, has to be induced, and then there's got to be energy behind that pattern, like within the body. And so the frequencies that we design provide that missing piece. Um, and I think one of the things that we're going to focus on is a few different topics, specific areas where we can actually see improvement. On your webpage, we've got some special offers. Your audience is fantastic. I totally appreciate like the warm reception last time. Thank you,
Yep.
sir. Thank you. And a big part of the work that we do is we are physically modeling things like the energy fields associated with things like astrological bodies. So we're looking at things like, shear wavefronts between different stellar bodies. We're looking at different types of energy fields and dynamics. And then we're trying to capture an essence, actually capture a physical essence of that so that it can be produced. But this isn't the only scope of our work. One of the things that we also do is we model substances. The magic in the moment begins when an external force is interacting across essentially the surface or the membrane of the organism. What happens is that you've got an energy informational pattern inside the organism that's responding and reacting to pressures across the membrane. So when we have stellar forces coming in and they impact the surface of the organism, there will be a reaction pattern that comes up to meet that. And there's an intersection. We have different words for it. But with a substance, what we can do is we can actually analyze different substances and reproduce it as a frequency format. The way that we do that is we take a look at different parameters of the substance itself. And those parameters are things like dimensional characteristics, length, weights, width, etc. And then we take these different parameters and then we convert them into a frequency model, like a representation of the substance. And what's super interesting is that we can actually impart associated qualities of the substance through an energy field exchange, and the person can actually start, experiencing, qualities of that substance. And so what I thought I'd do is I'd step through just some updates that we've made to your site for offerings. Does that sound like a good place to go?
Absolutely. And personally, what I appreciate about this is, what was a huge block or challenge whenever I'd hear raise your vibration, or you have to live in the end state. It a lot of that was met with how. Like, I finally know what to do, but like, how does one really do that? And affirmation and repetition really helped a lot, but I feel like you're giving us that missing puzzle piece. And I love how you said inertia. For those who aren't familiar with inertia, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm driving 50 miles an hour and then I hit the brake, inertia is what has my body fling forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, like essentially what you've got is in that particular scenario, you've got inertial force. So
Inertia force. Okay, right.
yeah, and so inertia would be essentially, um, generally, what's the resistance of the medium.
Okay.
So if like as an example, if I could physically walk on the surface of different planets, I would note that some planets had a much heavier gravity than others.
Right.
And so the inertial resistance to me would be greater or lesser. But in your example, yeah, that's a very accurate representation of inertial force, where it's like, something has caused the car to stop suddenly, and so the force, there's a hazard that the person in the car might continue.
And what I got from when you said inertia is like what you're providing is like it brings the movement, or it at least brings like, because I can already see how a lot of, and that's what I appreciate. Whereas before, when we spoke on the peace talk versus now, I have so much more powerful of a grasp of manifestation and the law of assumption. And it's like before where I didn't, and I kind of still was just getting into it versus now I'm realizing how my journey of manifestation and just staying in that, now that I understand it, like creating with my thoughts and staying in that state, now I'm realizing how these frequencies help me do this so much more focused, so much more on point. It's almost like cheating, like taking steroids, or like, you know what I'm saying, super amplifying. So I really do appreciate this. I really do appreciate what we're about to uncover. And I did ask a question in the chat for those of you who are saying you voted. When we go to a certain segment, I will bring up that poll again. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to look at the launch image. He's definitely referencing, if you guys go to my website, thepeacedealer.com, you will see on the header tab Sound of Stars. So you're going to see what's on that page as it is available. And yes, Nikki D, this is available. I have the links down below. I also have the link to the original peace talk that we did, as well as links to his website. So if you haven't seen that peace talk, there was a lot of really dope material in there, and take some time to listen to that. But yeah, definitely excited.
I wanted to share an example, and let me know if this makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the things that can happen is, when we go through something that's challenging or stressful, we may sometimes attempt to inspire ourselves to continue forward and try to improve by remembering something that was positive in our past. Another
Right.
example might be, like, you may have been in a situation where there might have been a dream, an actual dream that you had while you were sleeping, where you overcame a challenge, or there could be some kind of vital memory in your mind, an emotional experience that when you're feeling down, you grab onto that memory and it helps lift you, to a higher space. So one of the things I want to be really clear on, the frequencies that I produce, they're very different from any other frequencies that are out there. And what they actually are is a literal snapshot of a state of being. And most of the frequencies that are designed, the body naturally recognizes, because the body itself produces an analog to these frequencies inside. So when you play the frequencies, what's actually happening is you're literally putting the state, the desired state, through resonance directly into the tissue.
Nice.
And so this is the piece that's missing.
Right. I like that you said the piece that's missing, because that, yeah, it can definitely reinforce everything I'm already doing, and I can already see how to be aligned. And that just makes me really excited, to be honest, because now we're stepping into the actual how. And what I really like about this is it's simple enough. I just put on a frequency, and like we mentioned in the peace talk, there's different methods of how you can play them, and it's really easy to see the results. You don't have to really like wait like weeks, or like, is this working, like, and what I didn't know, which we'll get into, is that there's so many different effects that you can produce that I would have never thought you can just, you know what I'm saying, do. So knowing your brainwave is important for manifestation. Absolutely. Manifestation takes place in the 40 of our mind. So to really be able to go directly there, I think this is ironically like an answer to prayer, if anything. So yeah, definitely once again excited to see what you got for us.
Let's take a look at how the page is updated. So when we go to your sites, we'll click on the Sound of Stars in the upper right part of the menu. And this will take us to an updated page. And I'm just going to do a share screen here. And you can see that on your end. Is that right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's happened is I've just placed it so that there's different selections These are vastly discounted collections made available to your audience only. And the very first one is Beauty Vibes and Fitness Frequencies. And you'll see under each one, there's a little red access button, access here. So when you click on that button, it will take you to a page. Now this one is up and running so folks can see it. I'm going to be updating this and just getting it into a nicer format, but I wanted to get the content up for your users. Now this is probably one of the more interesting collections that we've got. I'm going to go over like some of the phenomena. My membership often asks me to design frequencies for certain things that they want to experience. And in the course of that, we've found some curious sort of side results that have occurred. And while I have an idea as to how and why some of that's occurring, sometimes it's a real surprise.
Right.
So we develop frequencies for general health and wellness. And one of the things that we found was that there was almost an anti-aging property to these frequencies in different organisms. This is an example of a plant that was experimented with by one of our users, and she had put this into a toxic chamber for a long period of time. One was with frequency, one was without.
Oh, my bad. Are you on the other page right now?
Oh, I'm gonna just change that.
Oh, cool. I wasn't sure if it like.
No, that's on my end. Yeah, so let me just get that up.
There we go.
So we've got frequencies that affect organic tissue, and the ones that we're providing for the health and beauty have had remarkable effects on skin.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is an example of one of our users who had it was some kind of a skin infection or condition. She lives in Italy, and she had gone to the doctor. She tried different, salves, different kinds of treatments, and it just wasn't getting better, and they didn't know what was causing it. So she decided to just tape a pair of earbuds to her thumb and let it play, and in a very short period of time, that condition began to improve.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very trippy. Some of you may have heard of like the book, The Secret Life of Plants. There's that sort of it's floating around right now where if you talk to plants, the plants can grow better. If you harm a plant or if you cut a plant, you can actually, pick up an energetic field disturbance, with different kinds of instruments, such as a voltmeter, etc. So we know that thought, emotion, and intention has an effect on plants, to the degree that you can actually accelerate growth. And we began to see this before we were getting reports from, improvements to like skin, complexion and vitality. We started seeing it in plants first. And I'll just read the caption here. Note how the leaf that is not treated by frequencies shows decay and black spots of aging and decay throughout its surface. The overall damage occurring to the leaf is spread throughout it to a greater extent. Note how the second leaf that has been treated by the frequency shows mainly a clear surface with barely any sign of decay, except barely visible mild discoloration. There are no black spots showing at all throughout the main part of the leaf. Decay and blackened effect does not show, but it is only on the outer peripheral limits of the leaf, as though the leaf is pushing the decay out and away from its central core. Now, these same frequencies were also used during the grow period of plants, and I won't go through the details of all of them, but there was extreme acceleration of the growth rates over time and the vitality of the plant. We also applied frequencies to diseased blood. And in this picture here at the top right, this shows a state of blood stagnation. What happens is the blood will stack like dinner plates. They call it rouleau. And the reason that happens is that the electromagnetic, especially the electric field charge across the surface of a blood cell decreases, so it's not able to repel other blood cells, and so it begins to stack. But the way this translates into the body is a very noticeable lack of physical energy. So when a person has rouleau, and rouleau is a common thing, like, people with chronic fatigue, or if you're under stress, your diet hasn't been good and you feel kind of sluggish or lethargic, there's a good chance that rouleau will occur. And we actually had a lab, I believe it was in Germany, working with one of our members, and they did an extensive blood work test on before, during, and after frequency exposure. And you can see here in the lower picture, application of frequencies drove the blood cells apart and revitalized them. So
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty crazy. We also see like a change in water. So by playing certain frequencies to the water, you'll see on the left-hand side, it's relatively clear, but then after playing the frequencies and then freezing the sample, it became highly structured. You can see that there's like the water looks quite dense there.
Yeah.
And then again, the skin issue. But I'm just going to read a couple of these really quickly. And this is one of our members from Italy. She was working with one of the better known health and wellness retail stores in Bologna, Italy. She says, and Emanuela, she was the owner of the shop. So that's the picture of her thumb. Says, hello, doc. I'm sending to you our first experiment with the frequencies. Emanuela has been suffering from this problem on her thumb since 2 years. She visited many doctors. Nobody could solve her problem. She applied her earphones on the side of her thumb with a plaster and ran some of these frequencies. She kept it about 1 hour, 3 times a day. It's 2 weeks now, and see the difference. It's 4 days that she has not applied, and it is becoming red again. 5 days ago, it was really pale pink. Now she's going to apply again and see being more consistent with the problem disappears. And then as Alessandra updated me and said that the issue had disappeared after continuing that usage. And then there's another story here about somebody had stuck themselves by accident with a knife, and then the regeneration of the wound had healed up 99% within 48 hours. And then there's another one here who had fungus on her skin. I'll just read that really quick. This is from Swan Day, one of our users. I just wanted to share a testimonial since I don't see many of them regarding the efficiency of these frequencies. She's talking about relation to the skin. Most of the reports that we got, we didn't start doing research into skin issues, and so she wanted to contribute to that. I listened to this demo track, Healing Frequencies, for 25 minutes one evening. The next evening when I took a bath, all of the dead skin on the bottom of my feet literally crumbled and fell off. I normally would have to shave it off with a sharp instrument and still couldn't get my feet as baby soft as they were after listening to this just once. And
Wow.
that was, crazy, dude. And that was just the demo. My point is this: if these excess layers of dead skin were due to a fungal infection that she suffered with for many years, then that means that this frequency accomplished something damn near impossible. Just to be sure, I listened to the demo track regularly for a while, then stopped to see that dead skin return. It did. I feel it's safe to credit the frequencies with the improvement in my candida. Needless to say, I'll be purchasing the full version. Keep up the good work, Doc, and thank you. And so it just, there's quite a few stories. I won't go into all of them now. But what's happening is that we're seeing an increase in the vitality of cells and specifically the skin. And, this is pretty meaningful, not just for the physical importance of it, but also I wanted to just kind of highlight that one of the things that we see happening with these frequencies is that there's almost always an emotional, mental connection to some kind of debility. And so the frequencies were originally designed to improve state, and when people want to feel beautiful, when they want to feel, radiant, when they want to feel attractive, part of what's got to go on is that they've got to actually legitimately feel that way inside. And you've probably noticed, like, you've got good days and bad days, like all of us, but when you appreciate yourself, this, when you appreciate yourself and, you're approving of yourself and you love yourself, you're automatically more attractive, and the ideal improvement to beauty is we don't just want skin deep, we do want, like a better, healthier, more kind of radiant, glowing complexion, but at the same time, we want the feelings that go along with that. And so this is one of the things that we facilitate with these frequencies, and we've seen
Right.
dramatic improvement.
That's a difficult for some people to do, where it's hard for them to feel or believe what it is they're wanting to come into. So with the water, that kind of triggered an idea where it's like I can basically take a frequency charged with an intent, and then I can charge it in the water, freeze it, and then or just drink it immediately, which is really dope. And Secret Balance was asking, is this related to like scalar energy?
There's a good chance that there's an associated scalar effect, but these aren't scalar energies in nature. Scalar frequencies are essentially torsion waves. They're very different. So a scalar wave is a when you have two waves that interfere, especially when they collapse, that represents scalar. So scalars are very different from most EM fields. They have infinite velocity, so that and they when you're dealing with the electromagnetic spectrum, you're dealing with something called the inverse square law. And all that basically means is that if you have an EM field being broadcast, it tends to dissipate over time, so it loses energy over time.
Okay.
Yeah, but scalar waves are very different. But having said that, because of the nature of how our frequencies work, it's very likely that there's a scalar related effect that occurs internally as a byproduct of use.
And then despite that, or other than, for those who are curious, what is your zodiac sign?
I'm a Sagittarius, Leo rising, moon in Pisces.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, the moon in Pisces for sure. That's the vibe. But I love that you're a fire sign with that Leo rising main character. That's awesome. King Donald. But that's really awesome because I've always felt Sag and Pisces is very multidimensional, very perceptual. So it's like divine ascension. I love it. That's really dope. I'm very honored. Uh,
Thank
someone
you.
someone asked if I can ask you if 5G EMFs are harmful for us.
Yes, they are, and there's
Okay,
yeah,
that's wild. All right.
yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, it's not well known in the public domain that forms of non-ionizing radiation actually can be harmful as well. And the reality is that frequencies that are as low in bandwidth in as say the kilohertz range also can be damaging. But that's not it's kind of a tricky scenario, because one of the things you have to consider also is the power level or amplitude. So you can actually have there are frequencies in the kilohertz, megahertz, and higher bandwidths that can actually be quite good, healing, and regenerative. And then there's frequencies in those bandwidths that can be quite debilitating. So the trick is, you want to pick the right frequency for the right scenario and make sure that your power level is at a safe threshold.
And then Lotus asked, does EMF blocking jewelry really work?
Typically, no. There are like most of what, unfortunately, I've been like I go to a lot of trade shows and I interact with a lot of people, and so I'm very familiar with a lot of the technology that's out there. Unfortunately, most of the devices that you see out there that are EMF blockers are fictional. They're produced by people that either don't really understand what they're doing, or they're trying to sell something and they don't care whether it works or not. Having said that, there are certain things that actually can work as EMF blockers. There
Does
is
that answer this question right here? As what you're about to say, this also protects us from 5G and 7G, right?
well, the frequencies in okay, so there's different ways to protect against toxic frequencies.
Okay.
Probably one of the better ways is to have a physical block of it, and you need certain kinds of materials with a certain kind of
Like
structure.
ozone?
No, Orgon and Organite, in its most popular form, unfortunately, is toxic. And there's a whole reason behind that. I've actually had, I've been
That's okay.
one of the primary leading world, figures in the orgone arena is a fellow by the name of James DeMeo. And James DeMeo has an institute called OBRL, and we've actually worked together in the past and talked quite a bit. Most orgonite is composed of materials that produce at best a toxic form of orgone.
Does that include shungite?
Shungite's a different. Okay, so shungite can be beneficial, and
Okay.
there's probably some versions of orgonite out there that are made with better materials.
Okay.
If you're working with orgonite and it has a shungite component to it, that's certainly going a better direction. Orgone itself is it's literally like a physical representation of what we would call prana or chi, but as such, it's vulnerable to EMF. So
I'm so glad you're saying this, because from someone who's not as familiar, like, we're just told like, oh, orgonite is supposed to protect and shungite. So this is the first time I'm hearing it, and I really do appreciate that. Like,
no worries. Now, what I should say though is that exposure to positive orgone after having been exposed to harmful EMF can be very good.
Okay.
Right. So like if a person's been exposed to harmful EMF and then they get away from that harmful EMF and then they can get exposure to orgone, then that can be like super helpful and regenerative. And our frequencies in and of themselves, it's not that our frequencies necessarily directly protect against EMF. Like they won't necessarily block harmful EMF, but what they will do is they will offset the damage. And the way that they do that is through destructive interference and also constructive interference. Right. What I mean by that is that the frequencies, and I've said this before, I just want to be really clear. Although we've gotten amazing results with our work, none of this stuff is FDA approved. I'm not a medical doctor, and I'm not advocating, this, as medical diagnosis or treatment. I'm simply saying that this is the experience that I've had as an independent science researcher, right, with our thousands of members, over 15 years. So we've seen this play out. But one of the things our frequencies appear to be able to do is essentially, like if tissue has been damaged to a degree by harmful EMF, the frequencies can help rebuild the tissue. So it's like it interferes with the toxicity.
Does pneumite work?
I'm not familiar with pneumite.
Yeah, I've never heard of it myself, but I really love the experimental approach, because especially with the thousands, like it's amazing to see that there's still so much, potential to be explored with this. And I really like it too, because people are going to the doctor, and that way they're covering their bases. And then when that doesn't work, you know what I'm saying, or working with concurrently. So that's really dope. I know we've spoken about the beauty and vitality. Would you like to talk about the graphene right now?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just pull that page up here.
And then the graphene, does that relate to vaccinations?
Boy, I don't want to get a strike on your channel.
No, it's cool.
Okay, you know what? Let me do this before we jump into the graphene. I just want to show your audience one last thing.
Yeah, no problem.
So bear with me here. I'm just gonna present a different page, because you and I were talking about this subject, and I want to just make sure that I cover it here. And this is probably something we should go over. Can you see this on the screen? Yeah. So we have two modes of option when we're using the frequencies. You can play them as sound, and when people purchase the frequencies, they get a full information package, like how do I use this? And so a lot of the frequencies lend themselves really well to being played as sound. And when you play them as sound, you want to play the volume loud enough so that you can sense the frequencies moving across the skin. But you're not limited to just sound. You can also convert the sound into something called PEMF, or pulsed electromagnetic field. And so what that means is you can get coils, and you can get big ones. The one in the lower right corner, that one's about 12 inches wide, and it's about 6 inches high. It's quite strong. That's attached to a 20,000 watt amplifier. So I use that for basement experiments. And then on the left is a portable one. You can see that it's like a little phone, and then the device in the middle is like a portable amplifier. It's battery operated. And then you've got a small coil here. And the purpose of that is to be able to carry it around with you to play the frequency silently, whatever you're doing. You go shopping, you're going for a hike, you're going to go to the gym, that sort of thing. And those beauty and like the beauty and fitness frequencies, these are on sale right now, and it's quite a large discount. So we've got the skin restoration, clinical grade experimental prototype that usually sells for $653 to our users. Then we've got an exercise and fitness collection, and that's $233 US. And that collection of frequencies, really powerful tracks, boosts energy, boosts focus, boosts stamina. I've used these myself a lot, and it's pretty amazing to use them when you're playing them as sound. And you can certainly play the frequencies with other music in the background, because the way they're designed is they can actually embed well into music. You just need to be able to sense them. Yeah. That's awesome. So for your members only, that price for both those collections is $249.97. And so we're probably going to have, I'm going to update this page over the next 24 hours, and I'll also include a smaller collection of frequencies at a lesser price for people that just want to try a sampler. But let's go back to your question. And also, just regarding those coils, I do not sell these coils, and there are different providers that are out there. Most of the providers that are the larger ones, they unfortunately charge too much, I think, for how much it costs to build them. So what I've found is the best sources are eBay. You can actually find a variety of these kinds of coils that work really well with our frequencies. And when you purchase frequencies from us, we actually provide you example links of things to go check out to get these coils at much less of a cost.
That's so awesome. And from experience, for those of you who are aware of Miko, our late friend Miko, she was the first person to introduce that kind of coil to me. And I didn't even think that you can play your frequency through them. So that just takes to another level. That's amazing. It's legit. You can feel there's like a metal ball you put in, and you can feel the frequency there too, and put it on there. It vibrates everything. It's really awesome. And what really deterred me from getting it was because of the expensive price point. So it was like I was going to save up for it, but I didn't know they sell them on eBay. So definitely going to investing in that.
All right, let's go on to the graphene.
So the reason why I asked about the graphene, yes, PEMF, pulsed EMF. The reason why I asked, I have a poll. I'm gonna end this poll right now. I asked 31 minutes ago, will you get vaccinated? And instead of saying that, we'll say, will you get pinched, or will you get the vacation package? And 68 votes, right? For a long time it was 100%, but 97% of people voted no. 2% of the people voted yes. So these frequencies we're going to be speaking of, whether you said yes or no, is going to be of a benefit to you. And please explain more what graphene even is for those who may not be aware.
Sure.
Of what's a part of that vacation.
So graphene is a metal oxide, and there's different kinds of metal oxides. They're used in industry, for different kinds of purposes. It's an extremely strong metal oxide. It's one of the strongest substances that we know of. It's also in the form that is suspected to be in the vaccine. It's in a two-dimensional array structure, which basically means you have a very tiny, thin super sharp metal sheet. It's like literally like a metal sheet that's very brittle. And what happens is when it's introduced into the body, it performs a few different functions, but probably one of the most dangerous ones is it tends to injure, slice, and damage microcapillaries, so extremely small blood vessels, and also blood cells themselves. When graphene oxide interacts with organic tissue, it cuts right through it. Now, I'll just bring up the graphene oxides page here. Just bear with me for a second.
Gotcha.
On this page, I was invited by an international panel of scientists that were examining the issue of graphene oxide, and that recording is available to people to watch. We were only sharing it to our private members, but I put it up on your page so people can access it too. It's a Rumble video. So this is the graphene page, and what we've done is we've put a few different video examples and also some sort of information bites on it. And then we're talking about
vaccines too. They're starting to put it in food and all that. That's wild.
Well, it's frightening, right? Because it's like if this substance is being introduced into our environment, through vaccines and other vectors, it's pretty important to have some way to protect ourselves from it. But on this page, accessible through your site, they can access this information, and there's comments from users from it. And again, this is not FDA approved, and the method is, I'll just read this out quickly, and then I'll explain it a little bit more fully.
Cool.
So what the frequencies are letting us do is we're essentially strobing, like stroboscopic, like a strobe light type effect, graphene oxide with dissonant resonant frequencies, which are interspersed with CiO2, which is carbon. This is the chemical that's used as a solvent, and also you probably heard about people were talking about using some form of bleach, for the vacation. Now, this is chlorine dioxide, and chlorine dioxide is also used weirdly as like a water or pool cleaner. Now, the reason that it's used for that, some people that are into holistic health and wellness may be familiar with something called the Miracle Mineral Solution, MMS. Now, when you take this substance in extremely tiny amounts, like very diluted, so it's well within the safety threshold, it's actually capable of killing off a lot of parasitic organisms, which is why they use stronger amounts of this in commercial water cleaning. But it was found that chlorine dioxide actually dissolves graphene. And so the idea here is to apply a unique resonant pressure that should correspond with the graphene oxide brittle phase state. We want to attenuate the target to its vulnerable brittle phase, and then intermittently apply the dissolution waveform chlorine dioxide. No square waveforms are provided for chlorine dioxide. We're only using the sine wave provided. Sine waveforms for all substances have been the most accurate target profiles. It is known that different waveform types are often suitable or best for different kinds of modulation manipulations. Graphene oxide is likely to respond better to a pulsed square wave. There's a bunch of technical stuff. I won't go into the whole thing. What I'll do is I'll describe basically how this works. I mean, people are welcome to read it. I don't want to bore anyone with all the technical details, but here's how it works. So because graphene oxide is super strong, it's at least as strong as a diamond in some situations, sometimes stronger. When we're using frequencies to say kill a parasite, kill an organism, or we're using frequencies, to change state. Right. One of the things we have to take into account is how much power can we dump into the system safely, because we don't want to pump frequencies into a person's system at a toxic power threshold. Now, the problem with graphene oxide is that because it's so incredibly strong, using a typical frequency approach, remember when I said we can model substances, we can emulate substances with frequency? You know, we use different parameters, like we can take a look at the characteristics of a substance, its length, its width, you know, its weight, etc. Well, one of the things that can happen is you actually can use frequencies to break things apart, not just to represent them. It's the same concept as like when an opera singer hits a certain note and shatters a crystal glass. What's happening there is that the opera singer has hit a note that caused breakage in the molecular bonding of the glass itself. And the reason that it breaks is because the standing wave that comes out of the opera singer's voice literally occupies energetically the same space as the molecular bonds themselves. And because two things can't exist at the same time in one place, it shatters. So we can use that same process to deal with something that's toxic by shattering it. But the problem with graphene oxide is that although the principle still holds, we can theoretically use a frequency to break graphene oxide. Because the graphene is so strong, the power level that would be required to instantaneously cause the graphene to, you know, shatter, that power level would be so high that you would be putting the organism at risk. It would be such a high power level to break graphene instantly that you would whoever, if there was graphene inside of a person, it would be hazardous to pump that much energy into them. So then the question arises, well, if we can't use the right power level, how can we use frequencies to get rid of the graphene oxide?
Right.
And the answer to that is basically repetition at lower levels. And I'll just describe that really briefly. It was found recently, people were using something called a pneumatic microscopic drill. And all that basically means is somebody had a very tiny, essentially like a hammer, like a pneumatic hammer, a power hammer. And what they did is they had this hammer beat graphene repeatedly. I think it was for a period of 2 days. So they just kept punching it over and over and over again. And they punched it at an extremely high rate.
Right.
I believe it was probably in the kilohertz range. And what they found was that through repeat striking, the graphene actually did start to break down. Now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to, first of all, identify what the exact resonant frequencies of the graphene was,
Mm-hmm.
and then determine what a safe power threshold would be to apply it, and then a time span. And so what we have now is it's a theoretical. I'm just going to go back to that page. It's a theoretical representation or emulation of the process that worked in the lab, except what we're doing is we're slowing down the time duration, and then we're also making it available. You know, like obviously people don't have access to a microscopic pneumatic hammer or drill. So what we're doing is instead of using that drill, we're using frequencies. And the idea is, you see, graphene has one weakness. And that weakness is, although it's super strong material, it's also very brittle.
Mm.
And because it's brittle, if you broadcast the resonant frequency of graphene into it, and the graphene itself begins to vibrate, now there's stress. There's repeated stress going onto the substance with the intention of wearing it down. Now, if somebody got a vacation and they have graphene floating around their body, graphene has a normal half-life within the human body, and that can range for different people. But it's a safe bet to say that the average half-life before it begins to break down without additional vacations is about 6 months to a year. So it's like if somebody went and got like a single vacation,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got graphene deposited inside their body, then that means that without using, any other, thing to offset it, then they're probably stuck with that graphene for 6 months to a year before it begins to break down naturally inside the body.
And that's not accounting for boosters.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Because every single time you get a booster, you're now dealing with a fresh, supply of this stuff, which is going to have. And the danger is that the longer it stays in the body, the more severe damage can occur. And so the sooner that you take action to try to like break it down or degrade the material, the better. So the point of our frequencies is that we want to increase the time it takes for that half-life to cycle. So instead of it, say, taking 6 months to a year, our goal is to reduce that to what we think is as much as possibly 30 to 60%. I'm gonna say on the safe side, I'm pretty sure this method should decrease it by at least 30%. This is speculation, but I mean, this is an educated guess on our part, and it's based on other things that we've worked on. Like we know that we can emulate substances. We've been very successful at that. We've gotten pretty awesome results with the graphene oxide in this particular situation. If all we can do is increase its decay rate, then we've succeeded. But on this page that people can access off your website, we've got two versions available. One's a low-cost version, $69.97, and now some of our frequencies sound pleasant, and some of them, are best suited for a quiet delivery system. You remember we were talking about those coils?
Yeah.
The graphene oxide, most of the tracks do not sound pleasant. They sound like a jackhammer, is what they basically sound like. Yeah. Yeah. And, it's kind of understandable. Now, we've also encoded something that's equivalent to kind of like a subliminal, instruction into the frequency. And a lot of our frequencies have this kind of thing, which is basically it's an empowering state. So we don't want to just deliver frequencies that can help, grind this substance down, but we also want to try to, improve the person's state of mind and their emotions while they're dealing with it. But we've got two different versions. There's a full version with 11 tracks, and then there's an intro version with 4 tracks, and you get those there. Now, there's also more information. Like I said, I had not made this public before. I was only making this available to our private group, but your audience has now got access to this. So I'll just read this off. You can review this following information. Some of this is pretty stunning and fascinating information. Video of international science team discussing this method, and I'm on that panel talking with a few other folks there. How to use sound to disrupt graphene oxide. There's instructions, user feedback, reference documentation, technical information and data. And then we've got a bunch of PDFs that they can access. These are science documents to kind of read up on it. And also, some of this is a little bit frightening. Wireless nanocommunication, nanogrids in the body.
Yeah.
These were prepared by some of these were prepared by scientists that I was in dialogue with, named Pablo. I believe he's in Spain. There's a video. This is the you can access this through this link. It's on Rumble, and then these are all the links to that information. But if you're in a situation where you or a loved one has been unfortunately they've got this in their body, this is a method that's honestly, it's worth trying, and we've gotten some decent feedback from it so far. I have people that fund my research, and one of our patrons funded the developments of this so that he could get this out to people right away. So that's the graphene oxide. And the chlorine, what's happening here, I should mention this too. This is a unique approach, and I had mentioned this to the science panel, in that when you listen to the graphene oxide frequencies, they'll sound like a whack 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 whack. If you play it as sound, it's like a kind of a stepped, it's a square wave pulse.
Mhm.
But what I actually did is I went in through my design method, and every single time there's a pulse of the graphene oxide, in between the pulses, I've inserted chlorine dioxide emulations. So that means that when they play the graphene oxide frequencies, at the same time, they're breaking down the graphene oxide and they're getting a representation of the dissolving factor chlorine dioxide. So it's a 1-2 punch.
Someone had asked, is food grade hydrogen peroxide just as effective as chlorine dioxide?
Well, it's a good question, and I've certainly seen a number of comments and information bites coming in. Hydrogen peroxide like being like a good option. The fact is, there's actually like a number of different substances that can and probably should be used. We've documented this at SOS, and what we do is we provide like a list of all kinds of different substances and methods to use. I think it's a little bit hard to gauge hydrogen peroxide against chlorine dioxide.
Right. Yeah.
Well, the reason is you have to take a look at things like what is the dilution rate,
Mhm.
because there's different strength levels of hydrogen peroxide. So if we were comparing like something that was comparatively the same strength level, then my guess is chlorine dioxide would probably still be a better option. But you could probably use you want to stay within a safety threshold, but you probably could use a stronger dilution of hydrogen peroxide to approach that.
And does that also apply? I'm not sure where borax, alfalfa, and zeolite is, but they wanted me to ask about that as well.
Yeah,
I'm not.
sure. Yeah, sure. So zeolite is, I I'm personally in favor of zeolites. Like there are people within the holistic health arena. There's arguments that go back and forth. That some people claim that there can be a concern with toxicity. I think if you're using it properly and carefully, it's a decent option. One of the things that zeolite will do is it will bind to different kinds of toxins and help, basically evacuate that out of the body. Alfalfa is generally good. I think probably the best thing that you would get from alfalfa would be a purgative, slightly purgative, like purging the system effect and also vitalizing the system. Both of these things are good. Alfalfa on its own is probably not going to be enough to get graphene oxide out of the system, but certainly helpful. And borax, the thing with borax is that sometimes there's a little bit of confusion, and it's understandable. The main active part of borax that you're after is essentially boron,
Mm,
boron.
okay.
And with borax, it's just borax happens to be like a fairly easy, common, reasonably safe, as long as you get like food grade borax, way of getting it. Boron is probably one of the most important minerals that we should be taking in general, whether there's graphene oxide in our bodies or not.
Okay.
Yeah, there's all kinds of documentation on the health benefits of that.
How about chlorophyll?
Again, chlorophylls, anything that's vitalizing to the tissue, because it's not, you don't want to just try to destroy or speed up the decay rate of graphene oxide. You do want to support the body's recovery, right? So chlorophyll, barley greens, really helpful. If you can oxygenate the tissue, if you can introduce substances that help the body regenerate quicker, there's a lot of supplements that can and should be explored.
And then does graphene live in the blood, the fatty tissue, or muscles?
Well, I think I think like the biggest initial concern is the introduction of graphene into the bloodstream.
Okay.
That's going to be where the biggest initial damage is done. Now, one of the concerns is that after the graphene has been introduced, it appears as though it starts to assemble small circuit and machine-like structures. And
Right.
these structures appear to be embedding themselves into, more denser tissues, like the muscle and, different kinds of like, fatty deposits. Um, but the ideal situation is to try to like break the graphene down as quickly as you can before it has a chance to, deploy that more complex circuitry.
Right. Okay. That's beautiful. I understand you have some uh sounds that are still in the work but are coming soon, right?
Let's take a quick look at that.
Okay.
I'll pull this out. There's a couple of sort of trippy ones. So we've a lot of some of these tracks are longtime awesome performers. One is the antiviral set. Just give me a second here. I'm going to pull that up.
What when would you use the antiviral for?
Well, these initially came out years ago when people, I had a number of families in our group that had children that kept getting the flu.
Okay.
And then, of course, the parents would pick it up from the kids. So it's, this is something where if you're dealing with, and I shouldn't even just say antiviral, we've seen antiviral and also antibacterial and other kinds of, microorganisms respond well to these tracks. I'll just make this a bit bigger. This particular collection is viral inhibitor is like a kind of like a low bass sounding pulse, and it's performs like extremely well. Like over the years, it's a lot of people have reported that, just having things clearing out really quick.
Nice.
This other one's got a funny name, Biosparkorama. This one's had some unusually powerful effects as well. One of the things, what happens sometimes is bacteria and different kinds of pathogenic organisms will hide in the sinus cavities and also in the roots and cavity and these interstitial spaces around teeth. And so one of the things that's been noticed by users is that when they play Biosparkorama, they'll get curious kinds of twinges or almost spark-like feelings in their face around their teeth as things are dying off. And then we've got other kinds of emulators here, the cheese strengthener, essence of rose, the tea tree extract, and ionic colloidal silver. This one's coming out. I don't know what I'm going to price this one at, but we're going to make it very attractive to your users. Normally, the retail price on this collection is $179, but I'm going to decrease that. For your audience. We've got quite a lot of feedback on this page. This is someone, Monday I felt a cold coming, so to save me time, I made a combo of the tea tree file and the viral inhibitor in a sequencer program by having them in the left and right channel, slightly overbending, and then rendered it to a 10 meg file. He was just basically getting creative. Seems to have stopped the cold in its tracks. It can be made better. The viral inhibitor I used as a low. He just used a low quality demo version. He actually got those effects. And then we've got a bunch of other people that just talk about their experiences, dealing with colds, etc. One thing I should point out here is that, we've gotten some pretty unusual, powerful physical effects. And one of the things that we think is happening is that the frequencies are likely stimulating something along the lines of a microscopic, local to individual cells, cold plasma effect. We think that we're stimulating parts of the metabolism of the cells, and this is probably why we're getting some of the results that we're getting.
Nice.
And then I'm just going to go to the next one here. Let's take a look at the salvia, and you can actually hear some of the frequencies for free. This is on our Rumble and BitChute site.
Nice.
So these are the Salvia divinorum. I don't know if I can play this and you'll hear it, but you can go to that and check it out, and that's available through the page. And then I'll also just show you the landing page for that. Just bear with me for 1 second.
Shoot.
So this is just the landing page for the Salvia divinorum. It sounds very trippy. Like I say, some are frequencies. Oh, you got it.
Yeah. A little bit of the salvia. Right. Hold on. I can see how listening to that for a while can like bring an effect.
One of the things that we do too is we catalog user reports. And we've got some pretty, amazing stories that have come in from people, and so that's also included.
That's awesome.
But we
That's awesome.
Yeah, we must have like at least 100 or more stories, and some basically when you're using the salvia, you can expect some pretty intense experiences bordering on the paranormal, because what's happening with the salvia is that we're literally emulating the interaction between the drug substance and the body. So people are actually experiencing that as sort of a space. And then I'll show you one more here. And this is a really popular one. We actually have quite a number of professional traders, like market traders, on our groups. And this is a big favorite, especially with currency traders. Traders, yeah, it's interesting, the stories that we get back. So what we did is there's a process that we use when we're modeling a state. So usually, like, a state has a associated geometry that's relatively standard across a using population. And so we model that, and then people use that, and it will very quickly affect like their mood, their behavior, their thought pattern. And we've actually had financial traders get back to us. This is one of our traders comments. Was in the market for the GP JPY, and it was going against me. And about 15 minutes into this frequency, the prices started going my way, and it kept going, and I kept myself from exiting. For some reason, I was able to follow the prices tick for tick. I knew when it will tick up and when it will tick down, and at which level I can bail, which I did for an incredible profit. Marvelous.
So awesome. That looks like Forex. Great Britain and Japan. Wow. The frequencies will play in my head as I hear them so often, and I seem to be able to get back up each time I get whacked down. Wow.
And that was a financial trader from the United Kingdom. His handle was Nova X. So there's quite a few things we got coming up, and your audience is awesome, and it's such a good partnership. I've watched your so many of your shows, and it's such an intelligent approach. Like you have an awesome sense of the comedic. It's like you can relate to so many different types of people, and yet you're so sharp. Like you pack so much meaning and understanding into every single one of your shows. I swear I watch your shows, and it's just uncanny to me, like just how much you're so up to speed. Like you're just so ahead of the curve.
I really appreciate that, and shout out to the live chat. Shout out to those of you guys tuning in. Grateful to represent best audience on YouTube, like Cheza said. We will take that for sure. And I mean, you gave us a lot to really contemplate and process here. Personally, I'm gonna be investing more in these sounds and as I come and experience results, I'll be sharing those results as well. And I'm gonna take a much more of an experimental approach, because like before, once again, like when we spoke, I believed in it, but it's like, what do I do with all this? Like, I have a whole bunch of crystals and rocks, and like, I don't know what to do with crystals, so I just collected them. But now that I like understand manifestation, I know how much more to like experiment with, and I'm really excited. I'm really excited, David. I do agree. The chosen one, I love it. Or a main character, Leah Riley. But yeah, everyone's saying shout out to you. Thank you. I think, like you had mentioned too, anyone who is part of Infinity Gang or watches me, on this channel, they can reach out to you if they get any product that's not a part of what's on my website. They can mention that they came from here, and they'll get a discount pretty much.
Yeah, and what I should mention is that when you go to the Peace Dealers website, you'll be able to access the offers. That page will be updated on a regular basis, because my intention is to support the Peace Dealer and you, the audience, by putting more new offers up there. But you'll get a special prize. And one of the things also that we do is we provide links where you can get more information on how it works, if you want to use it as sound, or you want to use it like a quiet delivery system with a pulse electromagnetic field. If you are looking at any of our catalog links that are not part of the offer page, and there's something that you want to buy, what I would ask you to do is email me and just tell me that you heard about us through the Peace Dealer, and anything you purchase from our catalog on any of our websites, you'll get a special discount. So it's really important. Make sure that if you're buying something, if it's not on the offer page and you're looking at our catalog, please send me an email and let me know, because you won't pay the normal catalog price.
That's awesome. You heard the man, y'all. Make sure to at least specify that for sure. Let me make sure I can save that. All right, it's cool. I'm gonna edit this real quick, because I'm gonna spell it right with the Z. But yeah, and once again, I have your bio in the description, the relevant YouTube links, also, as well as the previous peace talk we did. So for those of you who are just being introduced to him, I truly would recommend you watch that peace talk. It was really awesome. And I think you'll definitely gain more, insight into what he represents and what he does. But Doc, thank you so much again. This was really awesome. Is there any final things you wanted to share?
I would share encouragement. I think one of the things that I appreciate about the Peace Dealer is that the Peace Dealer doesn't pull punches. Like, if there's something that's going on in the world, honestly, Michael, you're very straightforward about it, but at the same time, you also provide comfort and direction. So, are we in a tough situation? Yes. Is there a lot of chaos and volatility? Yes. But that doesn't mean that you're stuck. It doesn't mean that you have to be paralyzed.
Right.
Michael's the kind of person that offers constructive insight and inspiration, so that you can actually do something and experience life better, locally. One of the things I would suggest to you is that with these frequencies, you actually can empower yourself in such a way to overcome negative states and not get stuck in a dark place in your mind and emotions. You don't have to be stuck in a dark place. The frequencies actually do a pretty good job. I originally developed these frequencies for myself.
That's what's up.
Yeah, and it was because I felt like I was under stress, and I was honestly blown away at how much they helped me.
And I mean, personally, that's just, how do I say it? It's really, I know David said you got the answers, but yeah, I recently, started hearing news about apparently there's a new pandemic that might be worse, and there's new COVID variants. And I was thinking of the last couple of years, like, oh wow, imagine, hopefully this doesn't all happen again. But it taught me so much about, it taught all of us so much about really just trusting in ourselves and our bodies and not being fooled. And this now I feel like helps me approach this so much more confidently, knowing that now I have, greater planning should any of this be an issue. And I'm really grateful for you for that. Most
Thank you,
definitely.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And, one of the things that I'll just throw this out there that's probably going to be of interest to your viewers is that coming soon also to the Peace Stealers website will be ivermectin frequencies. We've successfully replicated that.
That's
And
awesome.
we've also created DMT, dimethyltryptophan frequencies,
Wow.
and we've got ayahuasca frequencies. Now, the DMT and ayahuasca frequencies are designed to impart the positive states without severe tripping. So
Right.
there's quite a lot of other things going, but yeah, no, I think like we're on the same page. Let's do what we can to help people.
Amen to that. Thank you guys once again for tuning in. Make sure you check out those links down below. This video will be available in the special topics playlist for any of you who may want to check this out again. And you all have a very wonderful weekend. Doc, thank you once again. You have a blessed weekend yourself. And yeah, happy Friday, you all. And until next time, peace out.
Thank you, sir.